Hello YouTube. So today I'm going to show you how to make an easy notepad with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's going to be in a WYSIWYG editor, which just means what you see is what you get. And yeah, I'm going to start off with the HTML content, and then I'm going to go up to the styling. Well, actually, no, I'm going to go to the content, then the scripting, then the styles. And once again, it's based off code I've already made, because this way I won't be confused, or I won't pause a lot, and this way I can just be, fast, quick. So, yeah, let's get started. So, the HTML part, it's very, very easy. We just have to do a few elements, and by a few, I mean like 6, or 7, or something like that, I don't know. I put a white noise blocker thing in front of my mic, so hopefully you won't hear my keyboard in the background. Yeah. Let's get started. No more delays. Okay, so first thing we're going to start off with is just a plain development, no special attributes. This guy's just ordinary. Then we're going to create a select element inside him, set the ID to font name, and just note, this is a very basic tutorial. It's not super advanced, so I'm not going to do like, I don't know, weird string ID. Nah, it's just going to be very basic, simple names. And all of the elements inside this div are going to have a class of style editor, because that's how it's going to go. So if you see me type in style editor, like quiet, and then I just type in style editor, it's because we're in the development. Yeah. Now, I'm gonna add a tooltip to each of these, just because, maybe you forget what it's for somehow, and you want to know what it does. That's gonna tell you. Now we're gonna create an input. Font size. This is gonna be the font size. And obviously, font size. And since this is an input element, you can't put any children in it, so you gotta just block it off. And actually, I'm gonna copy and paste this so that's quicker. And also, these two are pretty big. These two are pretty simple. But there is one other thing we have to do. So for this, I'm gonna set this to say font size, but we also have to set what kind of input they are. So this is going to be a number input. This is going to be a, oh my god, if I can type, a color, oh my gosh, a color input, and so is this. Actually, I'm gonna pause for a sec. I just now realized something I forgot. Okay, I fixed it. Yeah. Okay. I'm actually going to resize this to 891, because that's the same size as the other side, the other monitor, the other one, the prepared one I have. That way I'm not all, confused like I said before. Yeah. Now we're going to create a button, still inside this development. It's going to be a button that sets the notepad's text to the font sample sample sentence for looking at a font. See what the letters look like, and it's actually in the sample sentence is the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. I've checked once before. It actually does have every single letter of the alphabet. Maybe not uppercase, but definitely lowercase. So yeah, you will be able to. You can actually see what each letter looks like just by typing in that sentence. It's pretty cool. I never understood what it was for until now. Yeah. I'm just saying font sample sentence because I don't want to have to type in the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog inside the entire tooltip because that would just take up too much space. Now we're gonna set the inner text of this button to sample sentence. Oh my gosh, if I can type. Oh my. If I can type. After using the keyboard I'm currently using for quite a while, my fingers have pretty much rubbed the letters themselves off of the keys, so I cannot. So if I looked, I have to say about 7 to 10 of the keys are pretty much blank now. Like, I have to guess based off muscle memory. Okay. But, continuing on, this part is optional, and by optional I mean there are two different types of elements you can do. You can do a div element with content editable attribute set to true, or just do a plain text area. In the prepared version, I did a text area, but you can just do a div. But I'm going to do a text area for this. They're both going to have the same ID of Notepad, but remember, if you're going to do a div element, you need to have this attribute inside it, and it has to be set to true. Otherwise, if you're using a text area, you can just set the ID and then you're pretty much done. Okay, now we're going to go down to the scripting. Yay, fun. It's like over 20 lines. Longer than this. And probably longer than this as well. It's like the longest part of the code. Fun. Okay, we're going to create 6 variables. Obviously in order of the HTML. So font name, document. Since they're all IDs, we can just do get element by ID and then type the ID of it, and it will actually return that element. But the script tag specifically has to be after the body tag, because otherwise it's going to load them before the body is loaded. Meaning there's going to be an error. It's going to say like, it's not found or something like that. So yeah, now I've got to paste this in like 5 more times. 4, 5, 6. And I just have to change the ID inside the quotes. And you do have to put sample sentence before Notepad because the sample sentence button is loaded before the Notepad is. Now we get to change all the variable names. More fun. Yay. Although it shouldn't be too hard. Should be fairly quick. Especially if you're able to type fast. I can type decently fast. Okay. Now we're gonna create an array called fonts. And this is going to This is what will allow us to easily load any fonts we want into the select element, but it is not what is going to be imported in the CSS style tag. We have to actually match what's in here to up there. to up there. But there are going to be 3 font types in the select element that are not in the import thing in the style sheet when we actually do type in it, because they are actually special font types for browsers. I'm going to type these 3 first, just so you know what they are. And you could probably guess if you've typed in if you've used CSS before. It's sans serif, serif, if I can type, and monospace. Sans serif is like Arial, Roboto, Noto Sans, Open Sans, Lato, which, foreshadowing, those are fonts I'm going to be using. That's fonts like that. Serif is going to be stuff like Times New Roman, fonts with just serif in them, not sans serif, but serif. And monospace, it's basically fonts you use when you're coding. It's pretty much what a monospace is, or fixed width font. Then Roboto, Mono. I'm gonna pause for a sec. And Roboto, Mono. Oh wait, I just repeated that. I'm dumb. Okay. So, since that's one font family, we're going to go to a new font family. Well, actually, not a new one. Well, yes, but also no. We're going to go to a new line, because it's another font family. We are now going to do the Noto family, so, or Noto Sans family, so, you know, Noto Sans and Noto Sans Mono. Oh my gosh. That's the end of that font family, so, now this is just the rest of them, so, Open Sans, Lato, and Consolas. Wait, did I actually include it in the... Yep, I did, okay. Google Fonts actually has a... from the import URL actually has Consolas, it's just sometimes it will, sometimes it won't load. Okay, now I need to load it into the selector. So, if we do a for each function, and then type this is basically, so for each is basically gonna iterate through every single element. And the way this works is, you do the array, the for each, and then this right here is essentially represents the element, the element or the value you're currently on in the array. So, like say this was an array of HTML elements or DOM elements. If you want, like say the 5th, it would return a DOM element. If it was a string array, it would return, well, a string. And since this is a string array, it's going to return, well, you know, string. So, now I'm going to create a variable, a temporary one, called option. We're going to create a literal option element, which we're going to add to the selector. But before we do that, we need to append a text node to that option element. And we're going to put font in the input parameter right there, which is basically going to create a text node, make the text node, or its value, be the font, which is a string. Then we're going to add that text node to option, which is really just going to concatenate the empty inner text of the option element and the font string. Now, we can add the option element to the font name. We do this to add an element to an element in JavaScript. You do the element of which you're adding the child element to. Type append child, which basically means add an element. If it was just append, it would mean like text node or something like that. And then you enter like the text node, or not the text node. You enter the element that you want to add to this element. So basically the child element. And now that we've done that, we're going to set the default values for the style editors and then the notepad itself. So, font name dot value is equal to, I'm going to have the default be Roboto, but you can have it be any of those in there, just as long as the value in the string matches what's in the fonts thing. You can do an index, but you'd have to do like, you'd have to do it like starting at 0 and then go up. It would have to be a 0-based number, meaning, you know, starts at 0, then go up by 1. So 0 is the first element, 1 second, you know. Basically, the element, like, you know, second element minus 1. So second element would have an index of 1. That's kind of how that works. It's kind of strange, but that's just how it works. I don't know why though. Font size dot value equals 12. We're going to be doing points for this, not pixels. Points. That's the size system that Google Docs uses. Points. Now we're going to set the font color to black. So we're going to do 6 zeros. And this uses hexadecimal, so you have to do the hexadecimal code, which is 000000. Now, for the background color of the notepad, we're going to do FF, which basically is white. All zeros is black, all Fs is white. Because This in hexadecimal means 255, 255, 255 if you convert it to RGB. This means converts to 00, 000 in RGB. Now, I'm not a master of hexadecimal and colors, because the first digit right here, like in this, this applies to all these groups of 2. So, like, these are all, this is a group right here, 2 digits in a hexadecimal code for a color. You have the first element, or not element, no, or digit, hexadigit as well, hexadecimal digit, I guess. The first one in the group of 2, you multiply that by 16, and then just add this to it, or in other words, multiply it by 1, and then get the sum of these. So the sum of this times 16 and this times 1, so this would be, so you have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 15 times 16, whoops, is 240. Add 15 to that, you get 255. I was blanking there for a second. Do not worry about it. Now we're going to set the Notepad's default properties. So Notepad.style.font family. So if you want to set style through the attribute, not through the style sheet, you'd have to change the text, the inner text of the style sheet. For setting the style attribute, you want to be lazy, and do a style, you have to do if it's multiple words, then the first word is lowercase, so in this case, font family would be lowercase, font, so lowercase f, font, capital F, family. But if you did, just box brackets or square brackets, you do quotes, like single or double, doesn't really matter. JavaScript accepts either, because it's not, kind of funny how I'm a programmer and yet I don't even know what object-oriented means. That's because I only know how to program. I don't know, like, the definitions of everything. Well, yeah. Pretty sure, based on what I just read just now, object-oriented means, like, you have types and stuff. JavaScript, not a very in-depth programming language, because as you can see, everything uses var. You just have to assume what the data type would be based on what you're getting. So document key element by you just have to assume it's going to return a DOM element. And for this, you just have to assume it's going to return a string. You're just going to have to assume. So right here, you would do font family. That's the CSS equivalent. If you did, like, in CSS, you would type the property like this. So that's the CSS equivalent. This, and if you converted that to just a normal property in JavaScript, you would type, remember, first word lowercase, and then every other word after that, first letter is uppercase. So like that. And then we're going to do escape character, quotes. So an escape quote, another escape quote. That basically tells the computer or web page, I want to have a quote in here. I want to have double quotes. This basically tells it to include double quotes in the string without actually ending the string. Because watch, if I removed this and then, see, add it, it thinks that's it saying, hey, I want to continue this string. But by doing this might look confusing, but just think of it like this. You have the escape quote and the normal quote. You have the string, but then it ends right here because you have the normal quote. So we're going to replace this. I'm replacing this text with monospace. But, if you're following me, really just do this, comma, space, monospace right here. Now, oh my gosh, for the font size, it's very simple, 12 PT, or in other words, 12 points. Now for the for color, which is just going to be, hold on, 6 zeros. For the background color, and you do have to type the entire property name fully. You can't just do like back color, it's not going to work. For the background color, it's the same thing as right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 Fs. And then one other thing. Oh, inner text. This is just going to help you see the result of, like, you know, all the properties. Must have been hard. Whoever came up with this must have been bored out of their mind. And it must have taken a while for them to do it. Okay, now for the events. Yay! This is going to make everything function. And by that I mean, like, you know, when you interact with an element, except for the text area, because that's just simple, you know, type text, stuff like that. I mean, like, the elements that are going to be up here. Like, say you change the selector, it's going to change the font family, size, makes the text bigger, color, for, like, the text color or the background color, then sample sentence, which is going to be, like, right here. It's going to just set the thing to what's defaultly right here. So, font name. Now we're going to do input, not change input or anything else, just input. Because the second you change even a part of the value, instead of having to finish the, you know, like when you change it, instead of having to finish it up, like exiting the input thing, yeah, it automatically updates what's happening. Like the event listener, the event is automatically invoked or raised the second a part of the value changes. So like for the color, second the hexadecimal changes. Normally, if you did change, you would have to click, you know, like in the body area or in the text area, and then it would change. But with input, the second that changes, it updates the entire, well, notepad area. Now to do a quick inline event or callback, instead of having to go like function, parentheses, and then brackets, you can just, to make it shorter, parentheses, equal sign, greater than sign, curly brackets, and then end off with the parenthesis and semicolon to finish the event listener function. To enter space, type enter 2 times, then go into this white space area, type tab, click tab, then you'll have it indented. Makes it look nice. Now for this part, we're going to have to do a little bit weird. We're going to do a switch case statement. Really all this is an if statement that only accepts constant values. Now for the parentheses part, this is, you input a variable here. It doesn't have to be a constant, it can be anything. But it has to be a but the variable, like the data type, has to be something that can be a constant, like integer, string, char, double, float. Those are actually more complex data types, a double and a float. Well, actually, no, a float. Yeah. Only integers are accepted in JavaScript. Doubles are accepted as well. Along with, well, actually, I think it's doubles, decimals, and integers. Those are the 3 number data types. Floats and anything else is not accepted. Bytes, maybe? I'm not really sure. So, continuing on to where I left off about the switch statement. Let's end the whole supported data types. Type dot value, which is for input elements. It's always going to be a string. Because you're getting an attribute, not a special property or anything. Now this is the part where you're checking which type of value it is. You type case, space, and then do the corresponding data types. Like, you know, if it was an integer, you have a bunch of numbers. If it was a string, you have, that text inside the quotes, not outside of it, obviously. And now we're going to type sans serif, because that's, as you can see, the first element. So we first want to check if it's sans serif. Now we're just going to set the font family of the notepad to just sans serif. Now to finish this case, type a break. I'm going to copy and paste this 3 more times. Now just change this string to Now, it has to be sans serif, serif, monospace, and then we'll change that. Now we have to change this to match what it's changing it to. So, monospace. And now, now, we know if it's going to be sans serif, serif, or monospace, but what if they select all of these? You're not going to want to have to type roboto, mono, noto sans, etc. You don't want to have to type all those individually. So the best way to do that is to type default. That's basically saying, if it's not this, or this, then do anything else other than those. Default means if it's anything else other than what's specified here. Now, we have to do this. Up here, well, it's going to be kind of the same thing, only it's going to be dependent. Only we have to change this to be dependent on the font. We have to get this. Type this here. Type font name dot value, or just copy this here. And then just paste it here. And now this, so if you change it to like sans serif, this will be true, everything else false. So load sans serif. Same, vice versa for this, but for this is a bit different. Say if you have like roboto or consolas or lato, instead of doing this, it's gonna do, these correspond, except instead of saying roboto, it's gonna say like, open sans or lato or roboto. It's gonna say something like that here. So it's gonna be so think of the structure of this as this. Only instead of roboto, it's gonna be one of these, depending on what the user selects. That's what it's gonna look like. Now we're done with the font name. Now we're gonna move on to font size. Now for the styling, I'm just gonna copy and paste it and then and I'm gonna slowly scroll so that you can copy it all down, because I'd rather not explain the CSS as the video is already up to 27 minutes long, almost half an hour. Uh-oh. Okay, font size. Remember, input again. And inline function. For this, we have to do a little bit of logic, just a tiny little bit, like one little bit. If font size dot value is nothing, or now we have to do a parseInt function because we need to check to see if the value is since it's a number input, we have to check to see if the value is below a certain amount. Now, you have to type font size dot value. It parses the string. Check, since it's a number, it's always going to be, this is always going to return a number. It's never going to be returned as an error. Now we're going to, since this is an integer, we say if this integer is less than, now you can make it whatever you want. Don't do a negative number, though it's not going to work. I'm just doing 8 because it seems like it makes sense. It's still readable. At 7, it just seems like it wouldn't make sense, so, because it didn't seem like you would be able to read it. Now, instead of making it a number, set the value to obviously a string. Now, since right here, this is the minimum value, we have to set it to the minimum value since it's at the minimum, since it's less than it, or if it's nothing, set it to it. Now, a little bit of illusion-y stuff happens when you delete the characters, like in the input, right, like around right here, I think. If you delete the numbers and it goes to like anything, like 1 through 7, anything like that, the entire value will just change to 8, and it'll look like when you backspace or something like that, it'll look like you typed 8, and then the thing just replaced it all for you. It's kind of it's like a mini illusion. It's kind of weird. Now that we've forced the input to be 8 or more, we can set the Notepad's font size. Now, now this is going to be, I'm going to be doing, alright, you gotta type font size dot value plus. Now, for this, you can type any type of measurement. It has to be CSS compatible, though. So you can do, like, rem, which is root element font size, something like that. Pretty much the same thing. VH, I forgot what that was, actually. Pixels, or points. I'm doing points because I like that. Now, if you do a normal number, I'm pretty sure it just defaults to pixels. And if you do a percent, well, oh, whoops, not a 5%. I deeply recommend doing point or pixels, because if you do a percentage, and I deeply do unrecommend doing percentage, because if you type percentage, it's basically going to divide, well, not divide, it's actually going to get the font size of the parent element, multiply that by whatever's in here. So, like, if you did 80%, it's gonna be very, very weird, because if you say had the parent element to like a font size of I don't know, 10, if this was at 80 and you had this at a percent, it would do a font size of 8. And you do not want that. That's why you want to do PT, or pixels, because it's fairly simple, very easy, and it's very readable. Now for font color. I've talked about font size long enough and CSS measurements. Last three are very simple. You're just setting the Notepad style. All you have to do is this. Well, for the last one, it's not too simple. You're not exactly setting it to the value of the element that is being changed. Hold on, let me just do this. Since this is going to be, so this is going to be a string, since it's an attribute. It's like a key value pair, kind of. Key value, And then it's going to be a string, so yeah, they're both strings, so it works out perfectly. For sample sentence, instead of setting the value of the text area, or the notepad, oh, not input, click, because it's a button, and input wouldn't work on a button anyways. Now, instead of modifying the style and setting it to the sample sentence value, which wouldn't work, inner text, if you were to do that, we are setting its inner text, but we're setting, which is supported by a div element and notepad element. Instead of setting it to the sample sentences intertext, or text, we're setting it to the quick brown fox jumped over, can't type, a lazy dog. Ask the font sample sentence, like I said, allows you to see what the different letters look like in a font. Now, you'd have to do this as uppercase if you wanted to see what they looked like. Well, uppercase. Although I prefer looking at the entire alphabet itself just to see what all the characters look like. Just makes it easier for me. But I guess you could just use this. I mean, the element, if you use letters, you only get to see what the letters by themselves look like. But if you do this, you get to see what a word looks like in that font, so bonuses and non-bonuses, I guess. Okay. I need to finish up. It's already half an hour. This is going to be a while to upload this. Now, I'm just going to copy and paste the CSS. Oh, okay. You should be able to see the, all the CSS. That's the CSS. It's not that big. It's very simple. Now, this part right here, this is, just a teensy-weensy little bit advanced. Well, I'm just going to explain what this does right here, just so you don't wonder what it is if you're just doing this as practice or are learning to code for HTML or something. If you're learning CSS, I'm going to explain what this does real quick. So, style editor, what this part is saying is any element that has a class of style editor, that's saying, like, so look at any element with the class of style editor, but then here's the part, this part eliminates any elements that aren't these. Now, for some reason, the selector right here ignores the first element specified, so I just did this. if you do put something like ABC XYZ in here, and then type ABC right before that, and then do an ABC element, you will notice that the ABC XYZ element will have a cursor, like a pointer thing, like this. See my cursor? It will look like this, but for the ABC elements, it will just it'll just look like this text cursor. So you have to put anything you want. It can't be a normal HTML element though. Just any random string like this. I just probably do this. It's easy, simple. Then do a comma. Now any element specified here will have this property. So any select element with a class of style editor, any input with the class of style editor, but it also has to but its type, meaning its attribute of type, has to be color, which actually excludes this number input right here, which basically applies to these two. And any buttons, just normal buttons like this, set their cursor property to pointer. Now just run it so you can see what this is the result. I'm gonna show you the original because I tend to do that in my I did that in my last two videos, so I'm gonna just make it a tendency. This is what the original looked like. I did comments, but I didn't want to do them because this is a tutorial. I explained it as I went through. This is what it would have looked like, as you can see. That's the original. This is me showing you what to do, and what it will look like. As you can see, Roboto, this is cursor, pointer, pointer, pointer. There's an animation here, but it's like, since it's going from black to any other color, it's going to look instant because it's going very fast. But if you were to make it like very slow, you'd see the difference. It's just pretty fast. It's just going like 1/10 of a second, so it's very fast. But if you look very, very closely, you can see the smoothness, like the linearness or whatever of the animation. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, one more thing. The hover. In CSS, that's saying, when the user has the cursor hovering over an element, set the properties to this. It only sets, like, one property. It doesn't, like, make this thing look like a normal button. No. It just changes the one property you specify, the corresponding. So, like, it keeps all the normal stuff. All it's doing is changing the color of this button to, dark green, because that's what I specified. If I said background color of, I don't know, silver, it's not going to change the entire thing. Now, it's only going to change the color to dark green and the background color to silver. Watch. Yeah, you notice it more easily when the entire background's changing as well. See, there is an animation. It's just, since it's, these little lines, which represent the font glyphs, it's very, very fast and barely noticeable that it's an animation. As you can see, it just changes the color, because that's what we specified. We didn't specify the whole thing. That's about it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you thought it was very helpful as a tutorial on how to code or just how to make a notepad. It's a tutorial for both if you're learning to code and if you just want to know how to make a basic notepad. One thing, it does not change since this is a text area, you cannot set multiple things to multiple fonts, otherwise you're going to see the elements within this. The text area is like an advanced element. Any HTML code you put in it is just going to show it as text. So if you did an ampersand and amp, it would do the ampersand and the amp semicolon. That is actually how in HTML you do an ampersand. You have to do ampersand, which is this right here, shift 7, that's an ampersand. If you did ampersand, amp, semicolon, that would, in HTML, when it's loading the stuff in, it would only load this in, because you're telling it to load an ampersand. This, greater than, less than, quotation, you get the idea. that's about it. Yeah. I'm gonna end the video now, because I've already said the outro, which is me saying, I hope you enjoyed it. Bye. Consider subscribing.